so much for coming on the podcast. How are you doing today?
I am doing pretty great. Thank you so much for having me.
Uh, I have all the lives platform open right now, super transparent here. We are going live on Facebook, LinkedIn, and YouTube right now. So if you want to talk to us or ask us questions, please send us a message. We'll be here monitoring and monitoring the chat, making sure that Gabby is part of the live. Actually, I'm having some problems with.
No worries. There's always going to be something that happens.
I know LinkedIn is giving me a little bit of a hard time for some reason. Let's
Well,
see.
I got the chat open, so if anyone is already dying to ask questions, we're already here.
Absolutely. All right. Let's see if my LinkedIn can get updated. Sorry about that.
No worries. I'm still having an awesome time looking at your beautiful camera, so I have camera
Thank
envy.
you. Thank you so much. Okay, so that should be going somewhere now,
All right.
hopefully. Hopefully, LinkedIn.
You got this,
It,
LinkedIn.
it's, I don't know what's happening. Oh no. Panic on live stream right here. What is it like? Fail fast? What is that?
For
Uh,
sure. Fail fast, and I mean, if LinkedIn it's great to have LinkedIn, but if we have the other platforms too, I'm always a fan of just go with what we got. It's never going to
I
be
agree.
perfect.
I agree. You know what? I super agree. So let's try to just go with Facebook and YouTube.
There we
And
go.
then we'll upload to LinkedIn later. How about
Yep,
that?
there we go. People will get it. We'll still give them the content.
Great. So uh, thank you everybody for being patient with me as I was trying to figure out those technical issues. Today my guest is Gabby Lubin. She is the CEO and founder of Spark by Gabby. Her goal in life is to provide helping professionals with the tools to continue their passions. Gabby is a former teacher and realized that she felt burnt out. She left the classroom to learn about stress management and created this amazing company that she's going to talk to us about today. Specifically, her concentration is in educator wellness. Welcome, Gabby, to the Emboss podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. Really excited to dive in today.
So, tell us a little bit about you. Where are you from, and how did your journey as an educator started?
Yeah, so I'm from Chicago, which is where I recently moved back to. I say recent, even though it's been almost a year and a half, but here we are. It's
Yeah.
pandemic time.
Yep.
And yeah, so I grew up in Chicago, left for college, went to New England, which was a little different, still cold. And while I was in college, decided that I was really passionate about education, really passionate about students. It was a thing that I'd done since I was a kid, honestly. I started babysitting when I was in fifth grade. I do not know why anyone put me in charge of children then, but we did. Um,
Yeah.
and so I decided to go into teaching right after that because I was
Yeah.
really enamored by that delightful
Yeah.
environment for students. Um, and I loved it initially. I taught in charter schools in DC. I was teaching
Yeah.
kindergarten. Then I moved into pre-K, which was
Yeah.
a year. If anyone remembers, if you're a teacher or an educator, or even just the first year of any job you've had, it's an experience. It is even more of an experience as a teacher. But I decided to continue and taught for 5 years. Um, However, at the end of like my fourth year of teaching, I decided, oh, like maybe my health and well-being are important maybe I should start thinking about how to take care of myself a little bit better. And
Mm.
this was 4 years in, 4 full years, like probably a little late, right? No one had taught me about how to do this. No one was really talking to me about like why I was important. It was always about kids, which makes sense. That's what you do when you're in
Yeah.
education. You think about the kids first. But I went with some coworkers to a spin studio in DC, Cycle Bar, if anyone is familiar with that. There's some in Chicago too, so you might know. And I fell in love, fell in like absolute love, and got super obsessed with it, like many teachers are with certain things, or many types of
Yep.
people, as I am type A. And in 6 months, I decided to try out to be an instructor. And there was this like energy I was feeling from this experience that I was not getting in teaching kids. And it was the ability to see your work transformed right in front of you. Seeing people in the studio feel as if they were just enamored by something bigger than their job, bigger than, I don't know, there was just this communal sense of relief after class. So I became really obsessed with that, and in my 5th year of teaching was when I was teaching both kids and fitness. Maybe I won't go too deep into this yet, but that year is when I realized that I was not feeling fulfilled from my full-time job. I was
Okay.
not.
What
And
was the thing that you're not going to go too deep into yet?
well, I mean, whether it depends on how deep we want to go into the story. Like this is like super, super
Tell me about it.
initial
I'm curious
phase.
now.
Okay, let's do it. We can do it. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was a really hard year that last year because I decided, I think, in my 5th year of teaching, I decided in probably October that teaching was no longer for me. Um, and so I had to go through multiple months because I wasn't going to quit on my kids. Many people
Yeah.
knew, but it was not something that I felt okay about. And
Yeah.
I go through many months of, first of all, what am I going to do after
Yeah.
this? And if teaching is the only thing I've known, like it's really hard to conceptualize a different career, and that's
Yeah.
how a lot of educators struggle, and I'm
Yeah.
struggling right now. And also to show up every day and have to give so much of yourself when you know
Yeah.
that this is just no longer serving you. It was
Yeah.
broken me.
Yeah. So how did you deal with, speaking of wellness, how did you deal with those moments yourself? And maybe it's not as well as you would have dealt today, obviously, but how did you back then deal with that?
Probably in a not healthy way of going and taking lots of spin classes all the time and teaching them. And likely, having a few happy hours and coming to late a little work.
Some like
Coming to work a
some
little late.
some like wine, here and there or something.
Yeah. I was burnt out. Like those are the signs of burnout when like you
Totally.
no longer feel joy from the things that you used to feel joy.
Yeah.
You no longer
Yeah.
feel empowered by the things that you wanted to experience, and
Yeah.
you're looking for a lot of outs. And that's what I was doing every day.
And so how did you go about finding your next step?
Um, so it's really different for teachers oftentimes than
Yeah.
other professionals because teachers have, especially if you've only been an educator, there's really like this box that you understand.
Yeah.
And you're super capable. Teachers are capable of doing so many different jobs, but you just haven't had exposure to different settings and to different professions and to different ways of applying your skills. Consultants do it all the time. They apply in lots of different ways. And in many ways, we're consultants as educators because we're thinking of many different components. We're multitaskers, we're doing lots of things in the classroom, but it's just a very different work setting. So I knew that I wanted to do something different. I knew I wanted to
Totally.
answer a different question,
Yeah.
but I had to think about what could I do in the meantime to get like space from my experience so I could figure out what the next question was.
I
And
love that you're taking space.
I mean, without knowing all the things about wellness at the time, I knew that that
Yeah.
was important. Just like reflection time. You don't
Yeah.
have reflection time a lot of the time with a busy professional, but like as an educator, no reflection time. None. None. Even summers don't Don't tell me there's no reflection time over the summer. It's just like recover.
Recover
Um,
from the year. Yeah.
exactly. So I wanted to do something that I felt that I was good at, which was teach fitness. And that was the only other thing that I knew, honestly. But it was also filling my cup a lot more than any of the other things I did. So in December of my fifth year is when I started pursuing other. I knew I needed to have multiple fitness jobs because
One is not enough. Let's be
well,
honest, right?
I mean, there just wasn't enough opportunity for me at that one studio. If I had maybe been a soul cycle instructor, that would have been a different story because they
Got it.
actually pay people as a real professional.
Nice.
Um, but why I was just giggling is that I went from one um, not respected profession to another not respected profession. And so getting a
Tell me
second
about,
job,
yeah. Yeah.
it, it was,
Tell me
like
about
when
that,
you
like
mentioned,
non-respect. Yeah, tell me about the non-respected part of it because I think we are it now in a very different appreciation state for teachers in this moment in time because we've had to do it, right? And we've gone through what we've gone through with COVID. But tell me more about like how are both non-respected and like even like the courage of going into that as well, right? Like knowing that this may not be exactly the right choice. I may were you afraid of crashing and burning and like how do you deal with that fear?
well, I'm glad that you say that you respect educators. That's awesome. It's because you're
I
a
do.
mom and you know what it felt like in the pandemic.
I've always had respect for educators. I think like I felt powerless about what to do about it because I've always had like really like a fond experience with my professor and I remember how much grief I've given them. So I do have a personal respect as well. But yeah, totally.
Well, it's just so interesting because everyone has an experience of being in the classroom. Everyone has had a teacher. Everyone has experienced education. But the saying, unfortunately, is really true. I mean, not true. I think it's just the way our culture thinks about it. If you can't do, teach, which is not accurate. It's really hard to teach. It takes a special kind of person to teach. It takes so much constant work to be able to be a really successful teacher, not just teach too. But still, we have this sentiment in our culture that if you're helping other people, sometimes it's just like it's not as valued. Same thing goes with it's the same kind of idea as fitness professionals, nurses. Sometimes we just think of these things as lesser, and the unfortunate component to that is that it was embedded in the way that education was created from the beginning of education in the United States, but also the layer on top of that is that there are mostly females in the profession, and that has not, unfortunately, helped more people have more respect for the profession as a whole.
Yeah,
So it's tough. And I remember when I
it
first
is.
decided to go into teaching, I felt lesser than a lot of my peers that were graduating. I felt like I had to prove myself to family members. Um, and shifting into fitness full time, I had to say, okay, I'm going to do it for this amount of time only because that's a way to make it feel acceptable for me and for other people in my life. And
Ooh,
I have to have like this aura of success, aka working at two different fitness studios, making X amount of money a week, having this many clients. Like that made it acceptable for me at the
wow.
time.
I felt that. I felt yeah, I felt that for real because you're now making me think in what areas of my life I am I'm also like thinking about it that way. I don't know if I ever thought it about it that way. And let me restate that. And you said like you made it almost acceptable for other to accept you in this profession in some way. Yeah, totally. You know, like the saying that you said about education and how like if you don't know, teach. It's to me, it's funny because growing up in tech and consulting as a professional, we actually have a different saying, which is like if you do it, is costs 1x. If we do it together, costs 2x. If I have to teach it, costs 3x. And so the view is different. And I also thought about the fact that like there are many renowned professors, granted is university, but still, that are men that have all the accolades, that have all the star power, the status. So what is the difference? You know? Like why is that good and why is teaching not or not as positive or accepted in society?
Oh, God, honestly, the $1 million question. But I mean, higher education is a whole other conversation, and I'm less of an expert in higher education, so I won't pretend that I am an expert there. But think about the way that we consider the differences between a preschool teacher and a college professor. They have the exact same job. They are helping people grow and become better humans. They're
Totally.
helping people learn how to interact with the world, with people, and with information. But the way that we pay those people, the benefits that we give those people, the opportunities that we give those people are completely different. And it isn't because their job is really that different.
Totally. And that was exactly the point. So thank you so much for stating it so beautifully.
Oh, it breaks my heart. It breaks my heart, but it's true. And we got a lot of work a lot of stuff to uncover, which honestly the pandemic has been helpful in
A
unveiling some
blessing.
more of
Yeah,
this. And
absolutely.
I'm thankful for it.
Yeah.
But K-12 education, and I guess probably pre-K-12 education,
Yeah.
has like run back as fast as we could to the new normal, or like the way things were, as much as possible, because they haven't had time to reflect. They haven't had time to think about how to improve education because they've been in this like state of fight or flight constantly.
Yeah. I have to make a confession. Yeah, I have to make a confession. Education is actually one of my favorite industries for all the wrong reasons because it's
Tell
inefficient,
me.
because it's, but because I think it's outdated, because I think, like I think I just want better for the teachers, my kids, ourselves, because I think it's underfunded. All the wrong reasons. That's why it's one of my favorite industries to take a look at. And there's so many initiatives of virtual now and hybrid and all that good stuff. But I think that takes me back a little bit also to Sparked by Gabby. So at some point you were doing these two jobs and you were doing like running as fast as possible. What was the transition? Hustle culture.
Big hustle culture. Yep, go ahead.
Yay. By the way, I am a recent graduate from us hustle culture into the next level.
Woo! Me too. That's what I'm
So
working on. That's great.
less is more.
Yes.
Focus,
Yes.
focus, focus. Yeah, totally. So how did you transition from that moment of those having those two jobs and into creating Sparked by Gabby? And also, like, what was the discernment about, like, specifically targeting in the process? Because I mean, there's so many, like, I don't know, fitness instructors as to the general public, right? So, what was about going back to your roots that made something stick for you?
Hmm. There's so many different components. So I think I had been thinking about my question in life, which is very like existential, but I am a deep thinker and I like deep thinking. So I've been thinking about what my question, purpose in life would be. Um, and as I left the classroom, pieces started to fall into place, and that I was teaching two kinds of fitness. I was not just teaching spin, I was also teaching HIIT classes and very different kinds of studios. One was a franchise model with really just it as a business versus as a passion. And then the other space I was teaching was a small business, Black LGBTQ owned studio, which had all the passion, all the purpose, as well as just like opportunities to experiment. Um, so I was starting to put the pieces together emotionally, physically, and then also just like experientially through this. And
Nice.
my two questions that I was left with were, do I want to go back to be a part of the educational system? Or do I want to go back to solve a problem in the educational system? Because there was still, I had this drive still to be a part of it because there was just something unfinished about my experience. And I was still very passionate about being in the educational space. So I decided, honestly, decided that going back to be a part of the system would just bring me too much stress. And I was having way too much of a positive experience teaching fitness. I felt much healthier. I felt happier. I felt fulfilled. And I was like, why in the world would I go back and choose stress? Like this just does not make sense. So I wanted to think about why did I leave? Why are people leaving? What was the thing that caused me and 44% of educators in the first 5 years to say this isn't for me? Um, and that number was like a big aha moment. So,
Totally.
the way I made this new life for me acceptable, like we were talking about, is that I decided to apply to grad school within the year. And so that was the opportunity for me to reflect, decide what I wanted to do with grad school, and then apply. So I decided to apply to two schools. It's a little bit risky, I guess, but one of them was the Harvard Graduate School of Education. And it was
Yeah.
the only school that was thinking like big picture and having these big unanswered questions that were pursued on every level. So I was really passionate about that and I decided that educator wellness was the path for me there. Got into grad school, and then 2 weeks later, the pandemic hit. And I was a gig worker. I was someone who was making money by the hours I was spending inside a physical space. And all of a sudden, my 14, 15, however many classes and the one program that I had developed, and also my like 4 personal training clients, all of them it was all gone, all gone. And so the day, March 16th, which is crazy that it is almost 2 years now, almost 2 years.
Nice. Congratulations.
Yeah, I know, it's insane. March 16th, I walked out of my last fitness class and I said, I'm gonna do some, people have a need right now. People are feeling overwhelmed, they're scared, they're unsure of what to do. I have a service I can provide them. I can teach HIIT class, I don't need any equipment, I am a skilled instructor, and I also know the power of mindfulness, and I have been teaching mindfulness for some time. I'm gonna put both of those together, and I'm gonna teach what I called it then, HIIT and meditation. I'm gonna make a Canva post. I texted all my friends. I put it on Instagram. I put it everywhere. And I think like it must have been like 6 p.m. 6 p.m. that night was when 45 computers signed on. Lots of people with their roommates or their families or whoever. We all got on, and my 5 roommates in my living room, because I was living with 2 people and then boyfriends, we all did a class. And then we did it the next day. And the next day. And by Friday, I was like, there is something here. First of all, this pandemic, I don't know when it's going to be over. They say it's 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Who knows what's going to happen? Like, I see an opportunity. I am energized by this. People want this. Like, let me provide a service to them. And so I came up with a schedule for the next week, and we kept doing it. And, this right now is open to the general public. It was open to anyone who wanted to be a part of this space, and I was creating and thinking on my feet. I was trying to collaborate. I was trying to partner with people. Didn't work out, whatever. I did it on my own. No big deal, I guess. And it took this like safe space of COVID with nothing else happening, and an out. I was going to go to grad school, and if everything else failed, something would happen from graduate school, hopefully.
Totally.
but there was too much need and there was too much excitement from it that I kind of kept building on it. And last year, 2021, was when I really thought more deeply about the educator issue and how the stars are really aligning in this space when we need to
Totally.
solve not just a general question, but a more specific question.
Yeah. That is an awesome story. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I heard like a lot of like maybe lessons there too, a little nuggets starting up. What would you say were the biggest things? Like, did you dive into like all the podcasts, all the Medium articles, all the whatever, the Twitters and the, or did, well, tell me about it. Like, what, did you like get obsessed about like, how do you start a startup? Did you even know it was a company at the time?
The short answer is no. We were just doing it. I was so passionate about it and there was need for it. I was getting immediate, I mean, gratification in that people were signing up and telling their friends about it.
Nice.
That I didn't have to say like, what is this? And constantly reflect
Yeah.
on that. I think what was a big hang up for me and what I hear is a big hang up for a lot of early stage entrepreneurs is like, oh, like how do we be legally a thing? Like how did those balls fall into place or whatever? Um, and once I realized it was really easy, it's like incredibly easy to get an LLC, shockingly easy. Um, that was a really exciting moment. You know, I I think I think it was this really special time in my life where I didn't have to think about all of the right way to do things and just and did, which I think is if I were to give advice to any early stage person,
Yeah.
it is to not think as much about like how to and just to try to fail. And that was the best advice my mentor gave me. He was like, just ask for forgiveness. Just do it. I was like, all right, great. I'm going to take that and I'm going to run with that. Thank you. And haven't had to forgive too much.
It's been a really special time in which we've been able to grow and evolve in, like you said, a safe space where maybe like, you know, COVID and the internet and online is a little bit less scary than showing up at a class in person and you know
Yeah.
and having all eyes on you right this second. And I don't know if it's good or bad like long term, like what is that teaching us as humans. But it's definitely interesting, and it's definitely created more businesses than ever, so I'm excited about that.
Yeah. I think the barriers on both sides are lower
Yeah,
to experiencing new things or trying new
truly.
things. But sometimes you're right that if since the barriers are so low, sometimes that means that nothing is happening too. So it goes both ways. But there's been like so much entrepreneurship, which I'm sure you have seen
Yeah,
and felt
absolutely.
lately. But I do think like it was a really competitive atmosphere.
Yes, fitness is fitness was a thing for in
Oh,
COVID during the what everybody was teaching a class or something from
yeah,
home.
it was a lot. And I think one of the best decisions I made
Yeah.
was to charge from the very beginning because there were so many people giving all of their stuff away for free. And it's
Tell
really hard
me,
to keep back from
yeah,
that.
tell me about this decision. I did not know this. Tell me, like, how did you make this decision? Like, and how, how did you get
Um,
people to sign up for it?
well, I decided that I was worthy of payment, honestly, and that I am
Love it.
worthy, period.
I love it.
um,
My time is worthy.
yeah, it's just I think that probably the first week was I think it was probably donation based the first week, and we just did it via Venmo, and people were being very generous and supportive because they knew this was my full-time job, so I think that was helpful. Um, Maybe a little bit. Well, a lot of my friends were in professional careers, and not most of them were not teachers at the very beginning. Some of them were teachers, but most of them had professional careers, and they're like, well, this is my way of like giving back. Thank you for your charity, but also like do something that's important. But I think they started to value that right away. And I think the second best decision that I made, which we've now we don't have this as our business model, but week 2 of the pandemic was when I decided to do cohort-based pricing model essentially. And so people would opt in at the beginning of the week to take one of 3 cohorts, either Monday, Wednesday, Friday hit, and they would pay $45 for it. So it's like not pretty like decent price. They would opt in to take Tuesday, Thursday, like a core class, kind of like a Pilates at noon, or they would take Monday, Wednesday, Friday meditation class, and those were all like set prices, and they worked.
That's it. Really? Where did you learn that?
I don't know. I have no idea. But it was something I
I
came
love
up
it.
with, and we just pulled it out, and it worked. So we're glad.
Where did you get even your pricing? Why 45?
Um, Probably broken down into the per class pricing. Um, I spent a decent amount of time just like thinking about the business models of the 2 studios that I was working at, as well as like seeing some of the behind the scenes action. I was one of the more effective, I guess, or top instructors at Cycle Bar, which was helpful for me to see just like how much people were paying and how people were coming to classes and how much money I was making. So I knew a little bit about that. But then in my other studio, because it was a small business and I was one of the only full-time fitness instructors, so I would teach the morning class, and then me and the CEO, well, no longer the CEO, but the then CEO would really just talk about all the things, and so he would share a lot of the behind-the-scenes information.
I love it.
Really helpful, and he's my
I
mentor now,
love it.
Coach G. Shout
I
out to
love
Coach.
it. That's amazing. Congratulations. I love that pricing strategy. It's really, really good. And thank you for, like demonstrating yourself, or, like just declaring yourself worthy from the beginning and not giving stuff away for free. That's an awesome, like, good job. Yeah. Good job, Gabby.
Good job, self.
Yeah.
I think as a woman,
Yeah.
as someone who's in lesser acknowledged professions,
Yeah.
it is a constant thing that I have to think about and ask
Yeah.
myself about. And now that I've actually pivoted into education, it has been really hard to keep those pricing structures where I wanted to, because fitness is not really compatible. Like the amount that you normally, not normally, but the amount that boutique and studio fitnesses ask is not the amount that educators or education can really pay.
Okay.
And so it's been hard to find that middle ground. But it's been also, a blessing in disguise being a virtual studio, because the
No
overhead
store
costs.
fees, no
Yeah,
no, yeah, no studio fees, no,
that's how you make the most.
ta- towels, all that stuff. Nothing.
Yeah, which like, maybe one day there is going to be an in-person studio. Who knows? Like I have some visions. I have some ways in which I would
Of
make that
course.
really different. Yeah, but this is the way to make it work now. And this is the way that's important for people who actually need
I love that. That is so cool. So, what are you finding in education? Did. And I know we talked a little bit about this, about the stress of being an educator, but in today's environment, what are the pain points that you're seeing educators are facing that this business makes it so worth it for them, and worthy as well for them to engage and sign up and have more schools sign up and partner with you in order to give educators the wellness they need?
Oh, second $1 million question. So there's a lot going on in education, and there's a lot that has been unveiled because of the pandemic. The issues of the unsustainability of the profession of teaching had existed pre-pandemic, and we see that in a lot of the numbers, such as the one I shared before. 44% of teachers leave in the first 5 years, and I was one of them. But the pandemic has unveiled every other layer that was deep down in there and embedded. So the lack of time to reflect, the lack of opportunity to de-stress during the day, during breaks, during summer, the lack of support that teachers are getting, the lack of stuff. The list goes on. If you can think about it, then it's probably true. And there's probably 10 more of those things, at least. And it's really interesting because it is both a systemic and an individual issue. By I mean systemic, I mean all the things that I shared about, like sub policies or lack of vacation time or sick leave or just support during the school day. Those are systemic issues. But on an individual level, kind of what we've been talking about, what it feels like to be oftentimes a woman in a stressful environment where you don't have the capacity to reflect or the capacity to take time for yourself. And well, there's a lot of different layers in there for why, and that's not necessarily true for every single educator, but what has been the right word, what has been the norm in education is that it is on the individual teacher to figure out what works for them so that they can stay in the classroom and become more effective. And the issue with that is that we can't leave it up to the teacher because it's wasting a ton of money, a ton of time, a ton of student opportunity because of it. With that 44% that are leaving, every single time one of the teachers leaves, it costs an urban district $20,000 to replace an often less qualified teacher. And right now, there are like at the beginning of this school year versus pre-COVID, there was an average of 3 times more vacancies than before, which means that's an average of $5.9 million that counties have to spend on this, just finding teachers to come back. And there aren't enough. There aren't enough teachers that are coming into the field right now. I don't obviously know what the numbers are for next year, but this issue is compounding every single year because teachers are having to think more on their feet on how to support their students who are further behind because there are more COVID protocols, because the COVID protocols are changing, because principals are leaving, because everything. And although there are some systemic things that are changing, like I'm hearing some really fantastic success stories within different pockets of the U.S. I've heard some stuff in Colorado. I'm really close to a lot of schools in D.C. There's some great systemic things that are changing. But fundamentally, if teachers are still stressed and don't know how to cope with that stress and manage it, they're going to leave. And I don't blame them. As an individual who left because it was a lot, I don't blame them. So our role is to kind of think about this both on the systemic and the individual level. And how do we support both parts of the system? How do we today help an educator work through the shit that came up, the stuff that like they don't feel good about, that their self-worth is draining on? How do we build them back up, relieve that, so that they can come back to the classroom the next day and do their best work? But then on a more systemic level, how do we work with schools to make sure that this is, one, a priority financially? So still like working on my own self-worth and the self-worth of wellness. How can it be a priority within the structure of the school day? How can we give teachers paid time to practice wellness like every other industry does? Every industry. Not every industry, but many industries. And how do we make sure that the leaders are walking the walk and not just talking the talk?
Totally. I 100% love that bit that I like just the sheer passion that I hear in supporting this group of people. It's amazing. And what business model now have you applied to the education industry versus like your more private model?
Yeah, so we started diving deeper into education last year, so it's still, I mean, I guess new, but I have felt very excited about the progress that we've made.
Yeah.
We moved from one pilot in January 2021, and now we have 15 fully paid school partnerships by November last year,
Wow.
so it's great. And so we had this B2B model, which is fantastic, and schools are paying for their staff's access to our entire
Wow.
resources, which
Platform.
is
Yeah.
huge. Yeah, it's huge. So live mindful fitness classes, on-demand mindful fitness classes, and then the opportunity to experience some other kinds of pop-ups. Like we're doing an embroidery pop-up next week. We're thinking about how to give people education on burnout, etc. So like really like access to practical daily resources. So that's on the B2B level, and schools are paying for that fully. And then we're also doing it in direct-to-consumer level because we can't always make systemic change right away, and it is important for us to make the impact that we can as soon as
Yeah.
possible. And those teachers end up being ambassadors for us, which is amazing. And they get to tell their leaders, hey, this is something that I feel that is really helping me, and I think everyone should have access to it. So it's great. It's been
I
great to
love
do.
that.
I enjoy it.
What have you noticed in the education model that you need to customize specifically versus the private sector? And specifically for educators, maybe, or for schools?
Yeah, I mean, we've done a ton of customer surveying and having a ton of customer interviews. By customers, I mean teachers, educators, principals, different parts of the education world. Um, and what we've learned is that the more that we can make it fit the exact needs of what they're looking for, because they could do Peloton, they could do Headspace, they could do all these other places.
Right, right,
Um,
right.
the better we're going to support them. So what this looks like is early morning classes, 6 a.m. to
Ooh,
5:30
yeah.
a.m. Yeah, I'm no longer doing those, mostly because I'm in Central Time and most of our clients are Eastern Time right now.
Got it.
So we're not doing 4:30 a.m. classes, but we are very excited about them. And so that's one thing. And then another thing is just having bite-sized classes. So I've heard a lot of feedback. We don't just do yoga classes, but yoga is one of the formats that we have. And a lot of yoga studios are still doing 60-minute virtual classes, which doesn't work for a lot of people. And it really does not work for educators. They need 15, 20, 30, sometimes 45-minute classes to get it in, get it done, and do their thing.
Love it.
Um, and the last thing is just really customizing kind of our language, I would say. In the class experience, it's not as if we're saying like, yeah, teachers, it was so hard for you today, like pick up another 5 pounds. You got this. You know, that would be a really fake way of doing it. But we do it instead by having staff that are in their shoes or have been in their shoes. People who understand what they're going through so that they can target mindfulness practices to what they need. They can target how they're thinking about the day or the week or the month. So, you know, it's testing season. Ooh, that's a stressful time. Here is a different way that I can shift your mind to not have to think about the stressors of
Sure.
testing instead. So it's less like in your face and it's more of a peer-to-peer community experience.
Love it. Love it. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That's really awesome, Gabby, what you're doing. What has been, I had another question about this, but what has been your most popular product amongst teachers and educators that you find that is really getting them excited? Maybe it's just by casualty that it is the most popular, but I was just curious to hear what they're gravitating towards.
There's a couple different ties, but I think this product describes the services are most unique.
Yeah.
I, like many things that I think of, it doesn't necessarily come from one specific article or one specific place.
Yeah.
It's just an accumulation of thoughts. So last January, I decided to create this class structure called Set and Finish the Week. And it is a 30-minute morning time live experience. We can take it on demand too. That is Monday and Friday morning. And the purpose is literally to set yourself up mentally
For the
for the
yeah.
week and then also close it out. So what it looks like more practically is it's so good, it's so juicy, and if I could talk about it all day, I would. But it's just like this beautiful marriage of a few different things. We start by asking a question and asking you to set an intention. And everyone knows, everyone brings out their journal, they're ready to do this. They write the answer to the question down. So things like, what makes you feel strong? Like really broad, general, whatever, wherever you want to take it. And then setting an intention. So very similar to like a yoga practice, but instead of like randomly thinking about like, I want to be present, fine intention, but like very general. Or like, I want to be sweaty today. And like those are things that you might think of when you're being unspecific. You have the opportunity to write it down and to see it and to make it more tangible and reflect on ones from previous days or weeks. It just makes it more significant and important. Um, so it's the journaling part. We dive into like 15 minutes of stretching, like yoga light, think about it. So it's really cool. It's accessible for people who are in their 20s and in their 60s. And we have people from all of those ages that come. It's amazing.
Nice.
Um, and then we end with a mindful movement, so a longer mindfulness practice where you're really getting into your body, into your breath, into your present. And then we close with the exact same thoughts of the question and your intention.
Aww.
And it is beautiful. People love
Oh my
it. It is
god.
something that people crave. It is something that people now just like it's more about like behavior change that you might see that is really hard to get for folks versus like here's a pig class. We're going to pick up something heavy and you might feel sweaty and good after. It goes deeper than
That is so beautiful. I really love that. I'm like, I want that too. Like,
that. You can
and
have it.
we can set up for it, right? Because it is available
Yeah.
for public too. Perfect.
Yep.
Oh, that is
Yep.
so
Anyone
cool.
can come. We
I
love
love it.
people who love educators too. So a lot of
Uh,
our our longest clients are people that started back in March 2020 to June 2020, and they're non-educators, and they're there because they care about education and they love
yeah,
what we do. So
love it.
would love to have you on it too.
Nice, beautiful. Believe it or not, we're almost at time, but I want to give you the space to tell us where are you going next with your business? What are you looking for in terms of support? If anybody is listening that can help out, make an introduction, sign up for a class, what's up?
I love it. It feels like a perfect transition from what I was just talking about. We would love to be supporting more schools and more educators and making more impact, of course. Right now, we're working with 15 schools, and most of them are in Chicago and Boston, but we'd like to increase that. So whether you yourself are an educator or whether you know educators, and I seriously mean like teacher, I mean paraprofessional, I mean special educator, social worker, principal, superintendent, any of those people, if you know someone, first check on them. Hey, I'm here for you, here to support you, and I care about you. That I feel like is always number one. And then number two, we want to share this resource with people because we are the only business who is doing wellness in this way.
Love
And
it.
I encourage competition if that's where we want to be, that's fine. But I want to make sure that this resource is getting to the people who want it. And school budget time is right now. So the time really is now to act if you care and if you're excited about this.
I love that.
And the
What is
best
your
thing,
dream? What is your dream school? Do you have a dream space that you want to get into that we can just like go ahead and put it out in the universe, or a couple? I don't know.
I mean, so at our core, we think about how our work is an act of basis.
Yeah.
So we want to be in schools that are serving the typically underserved BIPOC populations.
Nice.
We want to be supporting schools that are in both charter and public spaces, less than
Love
private,
it.
but we'll support private school teachers too. Um, but really thinking about how we can elevate the opportunity of teachers who serve some of the most disadvantaged students so that those students can be more advantaged.
Oh, that's so awesome. Gabby, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah.
It's been my pleasure. You can find Gabby on LinkedIn. I will upload the video also on that platform, and we'll link her profile in the comments. And Spark by Gabby is at www.spark, that's SPARK, by Gabby, two B's, .com.
Yeah. And you can find us on all the platforms. We have all the things now.
All the platform,
Even
all the
even
social
Pinterest,
medias.
Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, right? All of it. So we'd love to connect with all of you. That is my favorite thing to do. We love expanding our network.
Thank you so much for coming, Gabby. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a lovely conversation.